Today we woke up with a very sad piece of news. Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov, the father of Khabib, passed away today. He was hospitalized with pneumonia-like symptoms back in April. He was transferred from the hospital in Makhachkala to a military hospital in Moscow after his condition worsened. It was later learned that he had contracted the COVID-19 virus, and due to some complications, I believe he had an existing heart condition, and due to the complications from this, went into a very critical condition. He was placed in a medically induced coma. He later woke up from the coma and he recovered from the virus itself, but was still in critical condition from the complications. And reportedly, he could not talk. So he could understand, he could make gestures, but he couldn't talk. And he passed away today. In response, there has been an outpouring of respect and emotion from the MMA community, pretty much universally. So Khabib's lightweight peers, Tony Ferguson, Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, even Conor McGregor all expressed condolences over his passing. Other fighters from other divisions and other organizations expressed their condolences. Valentina Shevchenko, Tyron Woodley, Chris Cyborg, Max Holloway, lots of fighters have come out and expressed their respects to Abdulmanap. And he was one of the most accomplished people in MMA. So he had a number of titles or honors in Russia. He was Master Sporta, or Master of Sport, in freestyle wrestling, in Sambo, and I believe in Judo as well. Some places I see they say he was Master of Sport in Judo. He had the title of Merited Coach, or Zasluzheny Trener России, Merited Coach of Russia. For those of you who don't know, in the Soviet Union and still in some of the former Soviet countries today, there was like a unified sports ranking or classification system. And so Master of Sport, you could say, is some kind of a Master of Sport could basically be considered a black belt that is accredited from the state. Okay, so he had all of these titles. He coached wrestling in Ukraine. I believe that's where he was serving his army service in the Soviet times. He later returned to his native Dagestan. He was administering a state farm, a sovkhoz, in the region of Kiroval. And he also established a gym. And there's some stories or perhaps legends, I'm not sure if they're exactly true, that Khabib's first steps as a baby were taken on the wrestling mat. He had, Abdulmanap had a gym affixed to his house, and that's where he would train Khabib. Abdulmanap also trained a number of other champions or high-level fighters who are within UFC and also in other organizations. Fighters like Shamil Zavurov, Magomed Magomedov, of course we all know Islam Makhachev. These are all great accomplishments from a sport perspective. But really, when we want to look at why he's so universally respected, I don't think it's just due to his accomplishments in sport. Because there are many coaches who, if they haven't accomplished what he has, they certainly did close. They accomplished a lot in sport, but maybe they're not as universally respected. And I think this goes back to what Abdulmanap really was for the young men who trained under him. This is very important. I mean, just some basic history. After the fall of Soviet Union, there was a lot of economic crisis in the former Soviet republics, including in Russia. And one of the most hardest hit regions by this was the Northern Caucasus, which includes Dagestan. So if you've ever visited Central Asian country or Caucasian country, one thing you're going to notice is that if you go to a village area, you're going to see a lot of old infrastructure, which, let's say before 1991, before fall of Soviet Union, let's say there was a factory and now the factory is no longer functional. This is because a lot of times, in those days it was a planned economy. So let's say the state would build a factory in a certain region, even if, let's say, it made more sense from supply chain perspective to build it elsewhere. And this was just for the sake of having people there have a job. So once the country collapses and fragments, and there's no longer planned economy, obviously it creates big economic vacuum. And these are some of the hardest hit regions by that. So in that time, there was widespread feelings of hopelessness, very few opportunities. Young people, young men in particular, felt compelled to go down a dark path. Many joined criminal organizations. There was also foreign governments who would pay them to join terrorist or partisan groups. So this was all going on. There was a lot of instability, a lot of poverty, limited opportunities. And even Khabib recounts his childhood. He says that he would open up, let's say, the cupboard and there wouldn't be food. So it was a very, very austere time, very difficult time. And in this difficult time, really, Abdulmanap saved lives. Like, we can't understate what he did. A lot of young people who would have gone down a dark path, he brought them in, he trained them, he raised them, and he gave them an outlet for their energies that was productive. And today we see that how many of them grew up to be successful fighters and successful athletes. This can't be understated. This is a very important accomplishment of Abdulmanap. In addition to this, he was a very well-mannered man. We all remember his interview he had given very shortly after UFC 229, after the brawl between Khabib's corner and Conor's corner, a lot of bad blood between the teams. They interview Abdulmanap and they asked him if he would forgive Conor McGregor, and he said, yes, of course, and said that he would invite him to his home as a respected guest. And these type of things, in addition to his accomplishments in saving these young men's lives, is really what makes him such a respected man across the MMA world. It's interesting that there was an interview with Javier Mendez, and Mendez is often credited, and rightfully so, with really improving Khabib's striking. So you compare Khabib's striking today to when he first joined the UFC, it's like night and day. Javier Mendez is given credit for this. Of course, Mendez has experience with other fighters from wrestling background to improve their striking, to adapt their striking game to their wrestling game. And he did this for Khabib as well. But when he was asked about this, he was very deferential, very effusive in his praise of Abdulmanap. And he said, I didn't coach up Khabib. Khabib came ready to go. And that whatever Javier was saying, Khabib would absorb in an instant. And this is a sentiment, this respect towards Abdulmanap is reflected also in the statements of other coaches, high-level coaches, Firas Zahabi, Renzo Gracie, among others. He is very much universally admired. And what I also find interesting is oftentimes when these Dagestan guys come over and they're kind of assumed to be brothers of Khabib, and Khabib calls them his brothers, but in reality, Abdulmanap has 3 kids. He has 2 sons, Khabib Magomed, and his daughter named Amina. So, like for example, Abu Bakr Nurmagomedov is not Khabib's brother, although they have the same surname. I think they're related, but they're not brothers. But a lot of times, people assume that they're brothers. And really, they're not mistaken in making this assumption just based on how these fighters look at each other, the kinship that they have towards each other, as well as their level of respect for Abdulmanap. And of course, I don't know the family backgrounds of these people, but the manner in which Abdulmanap raised them was very much fatherly. And I think this is why he has that degree of respect among that group of guys. So yeah, this was a very sad news, a big loss for the MMA world. Of course, selfishly, as fans, we look at this and we might think, what's going to be the future for Khabib's career? Is he going to continue fighting? Is he going to retire? Of course, we want to see him fight Gaethje. We want to see him fight other contenders, but it's not sure. It's not certain what's going to happen. Khabib has been training as normal throughout the time that his father has been hospitalized, but we'll see how he reacts to Abdulmanap's passing in terms of whether he wants to continue his career